Hi guys, and welcome to this video. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much once again for joining me for today's case, guys. So last week it was a very kind of intense case I covered. This week I decided specifically to cover a case which was a little bit less intense than last week, and this week this case revolves, I'd say, 99.9% around adults solely. So we're not going to be really talking about children in this case, and not really making too much reference to kids, I want to say. Anyway, let's get into today's case. For today's case, guys, we are going to be going to India. Now, I don't think I've actually covered a case based in India before, and I've had a few requests over the past year to cover a case in India, and so for those who requested it, here is a case in India. So this case starts out with a lady called Swathi. Her name is Swathi Reddy. This case starts to take place, I want to say, around 2014 and leads into 2017. So for today's case, we have Swathi, who is, at the time she was convicted, 27. And she is a registered nurse in India, and she is married to her husband, who goes by the name of Sudhakar. Okay, so they get married in 2014. They have 2 children, I believe, together. I know that they have one that's a little girl. I'm not sure about the second child, but I know that they have 2 children. And on the surface, when they get married, everything seems normal. Sudhakar, he's a businessman who's doing really well. Apparently he's earning good money, everything. So they've got quite a good life, to be honest. Swathi, she starts to suffer with back problems, like back pain, not long into the marriage. I'd say like maybe 3-4 months into the marriage, she starts to suffer with quite acute back pain. So as she's obviously a registered nurse and she works within a hospital, she decides to go and see a colleague physiotherapist within the hospital where she works to obviously get some assistance with this back pain. So she meets this physiotherapist who's also her colleague, but prior to this, they weren't really like, you know, they weren't colleagues that like talked in the day and things, because they work in a hospital, which is obviously massive. But she meets this physiotherapist called Rajesh, and they start to have conversations, obviously, about her back pain, etc. And he starts to give advice and what to do and all of this kind of thing. Progressively, the situation with her pain starts to resolve over several months, etc. And obviously, because they are colleagues, they work in the same hospital, following on from the back pain situation, they continue to have a kind of communication, which is initially, you know, really professional, and then becomes more amicable over time, because obviously they work together a certain amount of time now, and he's helped her with the back pain. Now, a lot of the time, Swati's husband, Sudhakar, he is on business trips because he's a businessman that is doing really well financially, etc. So he's going on all these business trips to different places where he's often away for several days at a time, several weeks at a time. He's not at home a lot, and that means that Swathi is often at home on her own with the kids. If the kids are at her parents' or in childcare or whatever, she's at work, and then when she's home in the evenings, it's just her, and the kids go to bed, and it's just her basically. So she's got a lot of time where she's just on her own, essentially in the house by herself. You know, guys, when people have too much time on their hands, and I always say when they're in, well, a lot of people say this actually, when you're in the house too much for days and days and days, you will start to have thoughts which sometimes are not always positive thoughts. They can be, but sometimes you'll have more negative thoughts because you're just in the house by yourself all the time, doing nothing when you're not at work. And that can lead to things which are not going to have positive situations occur, or positive outcomes, I want to say. And this was essentially the case with Swathi. Is she started to have more and more communication with Rajesh outside of work. They would meet up outside of work, and then it developed into an extramarital affair from 2014, and it got to the point where Rajesh would end up calling up to 5 times a day, which is quite a lot. You know, some people have got a lot of time on their hands, even when they're supposedly working. And obviously, because Swati's husband is away on all these business trips, it's neither here nor there. Imagine if you're travelling around the country or you're going around the country, you've got quite a busy schedule. You are not necessarily going to be there to check on your wife every 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? He hasn't installed CCTV in the house, whatever. He doesn't have a clue what's going on. So Swathi and Rajesh, they're carrying on this extramarital affair, and this goes on for months and months and months and months, and the children are quite small as well. So probably when Rajesh is coming round, the kids are already in bed because they're like 2-3 years old. They're not going to be up, so they don't see him. So the husband's got no clue of what is going on whatsoever because there's no one to tell him obviously what's going on. So obviously when people end up having affairs, there's one or two things, well, generally, that can happen. It's either the one who's in a relationship or married is going to end up leaving their partner for the one they're having an affair with, or they're going to break off the affair with the person they're having an affair with and stay with their husband or partner, right? This is normally what tends to happen because, I mean, I don't know what else could happen, right? So it gets to that point between Swathi and Rajesh where they're like, you know, like Swathi doesn't want to be with her husband. The kids are getting a little bit older. They're still small there. They're like maybe 2-3 years old. And now we are reaching the point of 2017. So they've been having this affair for like 2.5-3 years or so. It's gone on for quite a long time. The husband still hasn't realised it's going on. And from his perspective, you know, everything is normal in the marriage. So basically, Swathi comes up with this idea. Well, they discuss this murder plan to kill Swati's husband, right? But they're like, how are we going to do this and be able to get away with it from a logical perspective? Now, obviously, guys, when someone commits murder, there is no logic, okay? Generally, it's just, I mean, unless it's a case of self-defense. Otherwise, it's not logical. So Swathi comes up with the bright idea, because she's a nurse, remember, guys, and Rajesh, he's a physiotherapist. So she's thinking with her nurse cap on right now. I don't think everyone thinks like this, but she's thinking, right, how are we going to do this murder, yeah? So she's thinking, yeah, it might be a good idea if we give him an anaesthesia and then we do something so he pops his clogs, yeah? So initially they decide that Rajesh is going to come round the house. He's going to hide in the house somewhere in the living room behind a chair or armchair or something. Sudhakar is going to walk in from his business trip. The kids are in bed or whatever, and they decided that Rajesh is going to hit Sudhakar over the head with like a metal rod, like a metal pole. So what happens is they hit him over the head with this pole, and he's out of it, but he's not dead. So what happens is Swathi, she calls one of Sudhakar's relatives called Aravind. I don't think it's his brother, I think it's some other relative, maybe a cousin or something. Aravind arrives, takes Sudhakar to hospital, and Swathi gives this whole storyline, because obviously Sudhakar is still alive when they expected him, I want to say, to be dead. So Swathi gives a storyline that somehow Sudhakar has fallen out of the bed in the middle of the night, hit his head on the floor or whatever, and this is how he's in this state, basically, where he's got this injury on his head. Aravind takes him to the hospital, gives the hospital the same storyline, they patch him up, whatever. The injuries that he's got to his head are not life-threatening, they're not really terrible, but they're not good, right? So they discharge Sudhakar within like a day. Sudhakar's back home now. Aravind has come over to stay, like, because he's brought Sudhakar back home from the hospital. I think it's like quite late at night or whatever, so Aravind has stayed over rather than going home. And then at 5:30 in the morning, imagine this, guys, like the audacity of it. At 5:30 in the morning, Swathi, she's woken up Sudhakar's like relative, Aravind. It's like, Aravind, it's 5:30 a.m. now, like, do you want to get going? It's like, talk about hospitality. So Aravind, bless him, he gets going at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah, imagine you've called someone's relative to take them to hospital rather than you taking your husband to hospital, calling an emergency like ambulance or emergency services, and then you're telling that person to leave your house at 5:30 in the morning when they've just been at the hospital with your husband that night. Like, you guys let me know, don't you think that's literally taking the piss? But anyway, Swathi had her game plan on for this murder, so I'm going to get into that, guys. But still, wouldn't you, if you were the relative, wouldn't you be like, what the hell, like, that's a bit rude, right? Anyway, so Aravind has now gone off at 5:30 in the morning, guys, and this is November the 27th, 2017. So now we're going to start going through the timeline of the events leading up to Sudhakar's murder. Okay, so Aravind's gone out the door, 5:30 a.m, 27th of November. Rajesh is now coming over because Swati's got on the blower to Rajesh. So Rajesh has now come over to the house, right? Sudhakar is in bed because remember, he's got this injury. He's come back from the hospital probably 5-6 hours before. He's just trying to have a rest and have a sleep, right? It's neither here nor there. He doesn't know what's going on. Rajesh comes in. Swati's there because she phones Rajesh to come over as soon as Aravind's out the door. Rajesh gets the same metal bowl again and hits Sudhakar over the head again, and I believe they do give him some anaesthesia before as well, and this time he's out, he's dead. So anyway, Swathi and Rajesh, they decide to take Sudhakar's body to the forest. At this point, Swathi, she's called up the grandparents, I don't know if it's her parents or Sudhakar's parents, to babysit the kids because she's probably like, oh, he's got an injury, you know, he's been at hospital all night, Aravind's been here, blah blah blah. So the kids are at one of the grandparents' house. They're not there when all this is going in. So now Rajesh and Swathi have put Sudhakar's body in like a white bed sheet and they're carrying this out the door. Now, these people, guys, are not in some tiny little village. It's like a town. Wouldn't you think, like, there has to still be someone walking around at some point, even if it's very early hours of the morning, it's 5:30 in the morning, there's always someone somewhere. Do you know what I mean? But apparently, maybe there wasn't. So they're now carrying out Sudhakar's body in this white bed sheet, like just holding it and taking it out. They take it out to the forest and they just incinerate the body. They just burn the whole body, right? Talk about heartless. Anyway, after that, Swathi, you know, like Swathi, she thought this whole thing through. Like, she's the one that's driving this whole thing. I think that Rajesh, he's on board with it, but he's not the one that came up with the whole idea. Do you know what I mean? So Swathi, she's like, right, next, like, step number 2, she goes like, step number 2, we're going to pour some acid over your face. Now, guys, I'm trying to put this into context because I'm thinking, like, honestly, when I read this, initially I thought, oh, murder case, this is. When I started reading the next part, I thought, what person would go along with this? Quite frankly, this is very odd, yeah? So Swathi, she comes up with the well, it's not even a suggestion, the plan to pour acid all over Rajesh's face. This is the person who's been her lover for the past 2.5-3 years, yeah? Because she's seen this film years before called, I think it's called Yavandu or something like that, don't quote me, and there was a remake of it that was done on Netflix on 2024, but it's only shown, I think, in India, not in other countries. So Swathi, she's seen, it's that film or another film, the one that wasn't the remake, that she's seen, and that's how she's come up with the idea for all this murder plan. And in the film that Swathi saw, basically, I think it's this FBI agent, guys, in the film, yeah, who decides to pour acid all over his face so that he can assume another identity of someone that's committing illegal acts so that he can capture them or something. Now, obviously that's the film, yeah, that's not what we do in real life, yeah, but Swathi comes up with the idea that once she murders her husband, she's going to get her lover, so Rajesh, to assume Sudhakar's identity. So her lover's going to take her husband's identity, right? And she thinks that the best way to do that, so they don't suspect that the husband is dead, is to pour acid all over Rajesh's face to disfigure him, which is an interesting concept, I have to say, so that no one can recognise that it's not her husband and think that her husband's just had an acid attack, basically, from someone, right? Honestly, the concept of this is just insane. So, and the fact that Rajesh is even going along with this, like, I'm like, whether I love you or I don't love you, I'm not going to allow you to pour acid over me. And if you do love me, why would you want to pour acid all over me? Like, honestly. But anyway, Rajesh is going along with this. He's consensual, yeah. So he allows Swathi to pour acid on his face. And I was shocked, guys. In the news in India, it says things like Rajesh allowed Swathi to pour a little bit of acid on him. I'm going to show you guys the picture and you tell me if you think this is just a little bit of acid, because quite frankly, when I saw the images and then I read underneath a little bit of acid, I thought, no, I don't classify this as a little bit of acid. Like, I don't know where she got this acid from, but it wasn't a small quantity, because she's poured it on his face. And you know, acid, obviously it's a runny liquid. It's gone down his chest, it's gone on his hands, like, it's gone everywhere, basically. Now, interestingly, Swathi, she takes Rajesh to hospital, even though she didn't actually take her husband to hospital when he was initially hit over the head by her and her lover, right? But now, because she probably loves Rajesh, even though she's just poured acid all over his face, she takes Rajesh to hospital and she's like, oh, you know, my husband and me, we just had been attacked in our home and these 4 people came in to burgle us. They poured acid all over my husband's face and this and this and this, right? So obviously the hospital staff are very alarmed. You know, they want to assist as best they can. At that point, Sudhakar's family are called, because it's presumed that it's Sudhakar that's in the hospital, not Rajesh. So it's presumed it's the husband that's there, not the lover, right? So the husband's family are called in. So Sudhakar's family arrive at the hospital and they're like, what the hell? So then Swati's doing this whole storyline. Yes, you know, someone tried to enter the home. There was 4 people. They poured acid all over Sudhakar, blah, blah, blah. And this and this. Now, obviously, because he's had acid poured over his face, I mean, they say it's hard to recognise him, okay? So the family are just like, oh my God, like my son, my brother, this, you know, they're just panicked, right? So at the hospital, the surgeon's like, we're going to operate. We're going to need to obviously operate on his face, you know, because I think there, it's not like NHS, you know, you have to pay for the surgery up front. So the costs for the surgery are over £5,000, right? So Sudhakar's family, they're like, right, that's no problem, we're going to pay. So they pay over £5,000 for this cosmetic surgery on Rajesh's face, thinking it's their relative, when actually it's the lover of Swathi, right, that they're paying for this surgery for. Can you imagine? And actually their loved one is dead and burnt in a forest. So anyway, the hospital staff bring Rajesh some soup to drink, like with mutton in it, with like lamb in it. And Rajesh is like, oh no, I don't like meat, like I'm vegetarian. And they're like, okay, all right, no problem. And then the family, I think they must have called, you know, for an update. Like they've gone home and then they've called for an update to the hospital staff to ask, you know, how is our relative, like how is he doing, from the doctors and the nurses. Yeah, so the doctors and the nurses are like, oh, you know, we're just monitoring the situation, blah blah blah. We did offer him some food, we offered him some mutton soup, but he rejected it. And his family are like, what? And they're like, yeah, we offered him some mutton soup, but he didn't want nothing to eat. He said he doesn't eat meat. And his family are like, nah, that's not right, because Sudhakar, he eats meat. He's not vegetarian. So now his family are a bit confused, because they're like, since when is our relative vegetarian? He's never been vegetarian. He's always eaten meat, like literally. At this point, this is when things start to get a bit deeper and a bit weird, because the family are like, because they were so alarmed by this whole thing about the soup, like to some people that sounds insignificant, but when you've known someone your whole life and they're your relative and you see them all the time, you will know things about this like them, like it's like a basic thing. And so they were like, this is too weird. This is when they've then contacted the police. The police have got involved, rocked up at the hospital and got Rajesh's fingerprints, yeah. And that's when the fingerprints have now come back as Rajesh's fingerprints and not Sudhakar's fingerprints. And remember that everyone thinks it's Swathi's husband in the hospital, so Sudhakar, when actually the fingerprints are coming back as Rajesh's fingerprints, so the lover's fingerprints. And the family are like, what the hell? And this is when they discovered that they've just paid over $5,000 for cosmetic surgery fees to have Rajesh's face operated on when he's not their relative. Now already some people would be pissed, because they'd be like, oh, I've just spent $5,000 and I'm not related to this person. But then the next thing that goes in your mind, like ding 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 ding, is, hold on, Swathi, who's supposed to be the daughter-in-law of these people, has told us that that's our son in the bed, right? But it's not, it's someone else in the bed. Like, what the hell is going on? So anyway, because this is all strange and clearly Swathi's lied and all of this, they arrest her. Rajesh at this state obviously has got like third-degree burns or whatever. He's got acid, he's had this bloody acid attack. Do you know what I mean? Even his hands are burnt. So they can't put him in prison because he's got to recover from all this acid attack. But Swathi, they arrest her. And then when Rajesh is like a bit more well, they arrest him and take him to prison as well. And this is where all the interrogatory process starts up, and Swathi starts confessing that, yeah, I did kill my husband, this is what happened, and all this thing starts coming out, like this crazy story. And then they take Rajesh to show them, I think, the spot where Sudhakar's body is, where they burnt the body, remember, in the forest. So at this point, most people would think, okay, right, they've got arrested, they found the body, we've discovered that Rajesh has been impersonating Sudhakar. Okay, Rajesh and Swathi are going to go to prison, right? But that's not what happened, guys. You know, there's always a twist to these cases, isn't there? So Rajesh does go to prison, and he's kind of like awaiting sentencing, basically. So this is all in 2017, okay? And I forgot, guys, with the timeline. So this all happens on the 27th of November, the murder. But the discovery of the murder only happens on the 9th of December 2017. So there is a bit of a gap between when this is all discovered, right? So Rajesh is sent to prison. He's awaiting sentencing. Swathi is sent to prison. She's now awaiting sentencing, and this is 2017. We now hit 2018, and after 8 months in prison, apparently because of the concerns of Swathi's welfare, that she might be attacked by other prisoners or whatever, she is put up for bail. So she said that she expected her family to bail her, but they decided not to. And actually her father held like a kind of funeral ritual, basically to say that he doesn't even consider that she's alive anymore. Like, they completely disowned her given what she's done, right? And so she doesn't want to, like, she's just in prison basically, and then I don't know, the state come forward in India and they actually bail her, which is really bizarre because she's a murder suspect, right? It's not like you've robbed someone, it's a murder suspect. So after 8 months the state has bailed her because they've said that it's too high risk for her to be in prison because she could be attacked by other prisoners because of the type of crime that she's done. It's like, why don't you just put her in solitary confinement? But they decide to actually bail her, and they put her in like this, how can I say it? Like almost under house arrest, but it's like a shared kind of communal house. I forgot, yeah, it's like a house arrest, but where you've got multiple prisoners in it. So they put her in there, but obviously she can still go about, like move about in the house and whatever. So, you know, for a murderer, I think that's very, very lenient to say the least, right? So that's in 2018. So she's technically in this house, chilling, whatever. So she's been in there in this house arrest shared house thing since 2018. And we now hit 2020. And the case has now come to court after several years, okay? At this point, sorry guys, I forgot to mention the kids, Swathi and Sudhakar's kids, they're living with his parents, so the grandparents, the paternal grandparents, okay? So it's now gone to court in 2020. There's several requests for Swathi to come to court. Like, obviously, if you're out on bail and the court calls you to come to court, you have to go. If you breach your bail, you're automatically going to get sentenced to prison, and that's literally in any country. So she's been called to court several times, not once, in 2020. Each time she's not responding to the call to go to court, and the court are like, what the hell? So then this whole kind of police hunt starts to find Swathi, because they're like, where the hell is this woman? And it said that when she was under house arrest in that shared house since like 2018, actually she's just skipped off to God knows where, probably La La Land at this rate, and she's been going to God knows where since between 2018 and 2020. She hasn't even been in the bloody house arrest house basically. So the police have had to go on this manhunt to find Swathi in God knows where, managed to find her, got her to court, and then it said that her and Rajesh got sentenced. Now, it is said at the time that they were looking to get up to 14 years in prison each. However, guys, for this case, this is one of those cases where I did so much research and I could not find the final sentence. I had to watch videos in different Asian languages and all sorts, guys, and even with the subtitles, believe me, there was a whole minefield I was trying to detect here. So it was hard to find the outcome, but from what I've understood from the videos, and obviously given the situation, they did get prison sentences, and the kids ended up living with the paternal grandparents. It said initially that when Swathi was bailed, so in 2018 when she came out, and the court paid for her to come out because the parents didn't want to pay for bail. It's not like they couldn't pay for bail, they didn't want to because they disowned her, right? Initially, when she first came out on bail, instead of going to the house arrest house, sorry guys, I can't even think what that type of house is called. Instead of going to the house arrest house, she decides to go to her parents' house, thinking that they're just gonna accept her back basically when she's just killed her husband, which is quite an interesting concept. And the parents like, no, we're not interested, we've disowned you, your dad's done a funeral ritual, we're not having it, don't come to our house. So that's when she's gone to the house arrest house, but then she skipped bail and gone off to God knows where, been missing for 2 years, but courts only discovered that she's skipped bail and gone off to God knows where in 2020. So that is what kind of happened with that, guys. So yeah, I feel the most in this situation, I'll be honest, for the kids, because they've lost their father who didn't deserve to die. And if this woman wanted to have affairs, she could have left her husband and kept the kids. It said also, actually, this is a theory, that because Sudhakar was very comfortable financially, like he was a businessman. I don't know in what field, but it said that he was earning really well. And it said that Swathi, she didn't want to lose that lifestyle. She wanted to maintain that kind of, you know, like comfortable lifestyle, basically. Now, obviously, she was a nurse and everything, but he was earning really good money. And so it made more sense to her for her lover to assume her husband's identity, pour acid all over him, and carry on living as if it was her husband, basically, which is just insane. Because you'd think at a point, like, someone's going to detect this, especially like even something like the fingerprinting that came up so early in this case. And it's like, she didn't think all of that through. She watched a film from 20 years before and thought, oh, that's a good idea, I'm going to do that. And that was the case, guys, of Swathi Reddy, or the face-off case. You guys down below, let me know what you think of this one, because when I started reading the case initially, I thought, oh, okay, right, this woman's had an affair, she didn't want to be with her husband, she killed him, whatever. But when I started seeing the twists and turns and pouring acid over her lover and all of this, I was like, this is a kind of new concept for me. This is one I haven't come across before. And if you are in India and you're watching this video, or you've seen the film on Netflix about this case, please do let me know if that film depicted this case well, because obviously this is the true story that film was based on, or the remake on Netflix, Yavandu, that it was based on. Anyway, guys, I will leave this case here, and I will see you again very soon for another one.